Welcome everyone to the Marie Curie Alumni Association organized session at this virtual ESOF. Today, we will be talking about Mind the Gap and how to bridge the expectation gap between researchers and employers. My name is Mustafa. I'm the moderator of this session today, and I'm also the chair of Marie Curie Alumni Association. Before going into the topic, I'd just like to briefly present what Marie Curie Alumni Association is. We are an international nonprofit association, over 16,500 members from 143 countries in the world. We mainly have geographical chapters. Currently, 33 geographical chapters are based on almost all continents of the world, and we work with the thematic working groups. We have currently 7 working groups. Our main focus is basically contributing and shaping the future of science policy, helping our members to develop their career, and also offer them the networking opportunities to grow. So if I just would like to give you a very short overview of today's talk. So I will first give you a very brief overview, what are the challenges, what are the topics, and then would introduce each of the speakers, which will be followed by the speaker's presentation. And at the end, we would have panel discussion. Just for you to note that you can ask us question on live via Twitter with this MCAA, Mind the Gap MCAA hashtag, and there is already a Twitter thread going on. And we have some questions for you because we would like to hear from you, which would be shared with all the speakers. So please go to menti.com and use this code and answer the questions. With this, we are actually right now in a very interesting era. If you look at the current scenario of the employment and researchers, you'd find out that there are highest number of researchers are getting graduated every year. In an estimate in 2015, it was said that about 130,000 researchers are graduating every year. So that means there are ample amount of talent, highly skilled researchers. However, when you look at it in a different perspective, from employers' perspective, you would see that they are facing some challenges to find experienced hires. So this is basically a survey performed by the Deloitte Global Human Capital Trends in 2019, where they have shown that it is really challenging to find the talent they are looking for. As an organization focusing on researchers' issues, researchers' life, we were very interested about what is affecting researchers' life. What is their expectation? Where are they going? Are their expectation is real? So in order to find out what is going on, we made a major survey in 2017 where we had over 180 questions and we got response from 5,500 researchers around the world. This was quite a large number of respondents and we got interest in demographic in the questionnaire and the answers. However, when we asked them, what is the major barrier for them in their career, for future career? You'd see them, of course, funding, grants are important issues, but lack of career management opportunities, lack of work-life balance or mentoring opportunities, and mental health of the researchers are some of the issues which came out strongly. And then, as an association, we are working with this issue, or a policy working group who had different task forces who are working briefly on these issues, as well as we are trying to provide the career development opportunities to our members. If you look a bit more deeper, you would see that in this survey, as well as the other survey, there is an expectation gap between the researchers themselves when they are studying or starting their PhD, during their PhD or after their PhD. So this is what you can see basically from this first answers here, where they expected all to be in the academia, or majority wanted to be in academia, but later on after their study, which is green, saying that almost half of them or double of them basically left the academia. And this is also evident from other surveys. Nature published this survey in 2017, which basically says that 52% of the researchers believes that they would have a job in academia. And this is simply mathematically not possible, because in a couple of other surveys, this number is, currently there are maximum 7% academic jobs are available, which basically would be researchers filling it out. So there is a clear expectation gap. So as an organization, we wanted to work a bit more on that. That is why we basically teamed up with an HR company based in Antwerpen, where we kind of found the expectation gap between an employer and employee, which we will briefly discuss today. Our first speaker would give you the result, and followed by how this survey, how this expectation gap can actually help a researcher develop their future career would be presented by our second speaker, Valentina Pharaoh. And then what are the career assessment issues in an open European science landscape? What is happening, what is in future, and how research culture can contribute to the future career assessment would be described by Karen Strubans. And then science policy and communication perspective would be discussed by Francisco Long. Just a very brief introduction about our speakers. Dr. Esther Hegel is currently the board member of MCAA. Prior to that, she was chair of Benelux chapter and just recently finished her PhD from Netherlands. And then our second speaker is Valentina Pharaoh, who is currently the vice chair of Marie Curie Alumni Association and doing her postdoc in University of California, Berkeley. She is also a science communicator. Our third speaker would be Karen Strubans, who is also a board member of MCAA, and in the past she was the vice chair of policy working group, and in her daytime job she is the head of policy unit of Royal Society of Chemistry. And last but not the least, Frances Coulon was an independent policy expert. She finished her PhD quite some time ago from United States. She got the AAAS fellowship on science diplomacy and then basically started her career in science policy. So she was served as the Deputy Secretary General of the United States State Department from 2012 until 2017 under the Obama administration. Other than that, we have two reporters, one Fernanda Vijanka, who is the vice chair of MCAA, and also Tomislav, who is the vice chair of MCAA Policy Working Group. So this is just a general overview. And once again, please go to this hashtag, use this hashtag. And right now I would welcome to our first speaker to share her story as well as the specific analysis or specific initiative which MCAA took to minimize the expectation gap. So our next speaker would be
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Mustafa. My name is Esther Hegel, and as said before, I'm working for the Marie Curie Alumni Association. I'm a board member, and as he mentioned, I just finished my PhD, and I also actually transitioned afterwards, and I'm now working in research management. And I'm very excited to present a survey to you today, which actually helped me decide what to do. So I will briefly describe how the survey is designed, how it looks like, give you a very short overview of the results and an outlook what we're planning to do next. So the survey was developed by Kazi, a small startup in Belgium. They designed the questions which were then distributed by the Marie Curie Alumni Association in their network, but also outside of it. The survey was funded by the Flemish government, and as mentioned before, it was addressing the expectation gap between PhD and postdocs and industry, in this case specifically for Flanders. And the survey looked a bit like this. So if you start from the left side, so there was the personality test that every talent could take, so PhD or postdoc, and they went into an expectation scan where they had 61 easy multiple choice questions. And after that, they actually got very nice results showing how their job expectations look like and how they scored in different areas. And actually, the companies on the right side, the industries, also filled the survey. It was a little bit shorter, but it had the same role, content, and they also did the scan there, had 29 questions, and could see what kind of job aspects they would offer. And basically, the nice thing here is that taking this from those two sides, you can combine it and look into how should a job offer look like, what do talents expect. And this will ultimately help talents, but also companies to recruit better in the long term. This is just a short overview how it looked like. So for example, from the talent side, so if you're a PhD or a postdoc, you can see for different values, a direct scan, what are your core values, how do they look like, how do you score, which team roles are very important to you. And you will get these results instantly after you do the survey. And what CASI did, they designed 6 different work values and identified different job content expectations, which you can see here and which will also be shown in the results section. So you will get your personal scoring there. And they also identified 8 team roles and expectations again there. So here you see the 8 different roles that you can basically score on. And those different questions were asked to both sides, so the industry side and also the fellow side, the PhD postdoc side. And in principle, the survey could be done for all kinds of research fields, and there's a tremendous potential in there. In this case, we decided to focus on 4 main domains, which are biotechnology, biology, chemistry, and materials. And we sent out the survey to all different universities across Europe and also our members, and asked them to fill the survey, and we had a very great feedback. And unfortunately, there's no time to go through all of the results, but I wanted to give you some results for the chemistry section. So one example of the results is the work value. What we found is that 1 in 2 talents find planning autonomy very important, and also self-development. Another one for the team roles, what we found, and that it's very important for them to actually work in a team and to contribute to the strategy. So they actually showed that they want to be very independent in their work. And the expectation gap found here is that strategic and executive roles are actually less prominent than operational roles. So this is just a very brief overview. There's a much more in-depth analysis of the results, which will be published soon on our homepage. So stay tuned, you can have a look into them more detailed. For the whole project overall, what did we find? So we can say that there is a multidimensional expectation gap existing between researchers and employers in Flanders, and we could quantify it with our surveys and with those key roles defined. And yes, so one key finding is, I think it's obvious, but on the other hand, I think it's very important to point it out here that researchers really want to have the ability to carve their own career path themselves. So they want to have their independency for planning. And basically, what's the outcome, or what do we propose, or the next step forward is that researchers and employers actually need to work on their communication to actually make this mutual expectation gap more explicit, to make it clear on both sides what those expectations means and how they can address them. So what's next? So So actually already doing this analysis is one step further to closing the gap because we can quantify it, but there are much more ways we can actually support to closing the gap. So MCAA is offering different kind of trainings in soft skill areas for communication to addressing the gap. And we also plan to continue with this survey. So the idea is that we would hopefully expand it to other career paths and also other stakeholders with similar interest in the job market. And yes, so this is just a short overview of our survey. And as mentioned, you can see the results soon on our homepage. And the good thing is you can still fill in the survey yourself. So if you're curious to see how you score on those different roles we just showed, you can go there and fill it in on our homepage from the Marie Curie Alumni Association. So thank you very much for your attention, and the questions will be at the end of the session. Thanks.
Thank you, Esther, for sharing the results with us. And our next speaker would be Valentina Pharaoh, who will basically take the survey and share her story, how this survey actually helped her in her transition. So Valentina, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the introduction, Mustafa, and thanks, Hester, for explaining what CASI was and is, because I really needed that to tell my story. So here I am to tell you the story of how I am on a personal quest to get the perfect job. So who am I? Let me see how to go to the next slide. Perfect. So I'm an experimental physicist. But of course, I'm also so many other things. Like everyone that has done a PhD or has worked has left high school. You're not just one thing. But for the purpose of this story, we'll look at the experimental physics side, because that's the job I want to land. I want to land a job in industry that is in experimental physics. So that's how I'm going to present myself to the job market. And I'm going to forget about all the things that I also am, like the Marie Curie Alumni Vice Chair, an illustrator, a designer, and all the things that I learned through my PhD, even being a project manager, a team leader, a writer. But let's forget about those for a while. And let's look at my path. Very straightforward. I got my PhD in physics, my bachelor, master, and PhD in physics, and I'm completing now a postdoc in physics. Pretty easy to tell a story about this. And I'm here because I want to leave academia and transition to industry. Of course, academia is great. There's a lot of exciting activities, exciting research to do. But for my personal taste, it's time for a change and explore something new where I can grow more professionally and learn new skills. So when I started this search, I had a look at a moment of self-reflection. I wanted to see what I've done and extrapolate the skills I have. And there's a bunch of them because, of course, I've been working in research for a while now. So I have all these technical skills, but they are not what counts. We all know by now that what you want to put in your CV is also your soft skill. That's all the rage by now. So I made this picture of myself, a picture that I can present to employers and securely land a job that will satisfy and fulfill me. And then I heard about CASI, and because I was already in the board of the Marie Curie Alumni Association, and I decided to take the test. Because surely, with all this self-reflection that I've done, and surely by having had industry-like experience in the Benelux region for 1 year, I know what the industry wants, and I know perfectly who I am, so there will be no gap for me. And could I be more wrong? Of course there was a gap, because like I was fitting perfectly the demographic of Kazi, and my best skills were ambition, were leading position, were thinking of strategic solution for business. So all the things that I know I can do, because I am a superhero when I look at all these skills. Of course I am, and everyone that has done a PhD is also a superhero. So when I stopped being mad at the perspective of being employed as an entry-level job and never finding the job I wanted, I decided to stop being mad and start to analyze where is the gap, why is there, and how can I do my little, what can I do to at least make it smaller on my side and in my search for the job. So when we interface with the job market, it's extremely easy for researchers to put on the table the technical skills. There is track record of them. You have your PhD. You can really prove that you've worked, in my case, with lasers for X number of years. And those skills, those are the ones that the employers can easily see. And then there's all this hidden underlying of skills that I know I have because I've done a PhD. And everyone in academia knows that we have these skills. But how does the employers see? How does the job market see my superhero job, ideal job, and their proposition of an entry-level operational one? So I inserted a mole in the industry background. I've done this move many years ago when I decided to marry someone that didn't want to do a PhD and move it to industry. And my husband, working in industry for more than 12 years now, told me plain blank that looking at my CV, it would not offer me any position that it wasn't an entry-level job. And it is my husband, so he was taking a big risk in saying so. So if he said so and he took the risk, I want to believe that is right. And the problem is that all these other set of skills that we acquire, this is part of the problem, they are not visible. We have no proven records that we have all these additional soft skills. Moreover, these skills, they are taken into, we have acquired often limited to the academic environment, which has a different language than typical what is higher role, senior position in the industry job. So what can we do to at least get closer? Now we know that the problem is partly what we expect. We expect a superhero job, the position where we can be both doing research, but also being a manager, being a business consultant, and all these other things that we are fascinated from. But also we want to show the employers that we actually have these skills. So the first step I took in my journey, it was to highlight all the proven record I have for those soft skills. I volunteer in the Marie Curie Alumni Association so I can have a proven record of my skills into management, into leading position, into organizing event. To give you a further example, when I talk with about my communication skills, the prospective employer, I can present to the prospective employer a different side of me. I can not only say, of course, I've presented at scientific conference like many academics, but I also presented in front of a stage, at a stage, in front of a public, telling jokes and presenting myself so as a creative communicator that can do much more than just presenting a slide with result. And that tells a different story. That tells a story that not only I can do the research, but I can also talk with the team members. I can also present in an engaging way if I decide to search for a job that is interfacing with customers. And these skills, they are not only there, they are provable. There is a proven record, there is a track that I can present and show and that the employer can see. And that's the key component. Leverage whatever you can put in your CV that is not only a vague idea of what you can do, but there is a proven record of it. So now I brought the employer closer to me, because now the employer can see all the skills I have, all the soft skills, and we can start talking about a different position. But at this point, the employer can still, because my husband knows all these things, and my husband still would not hire me in a senior position. So what can I do next? How can I fill the gap that is left? So in my service intelligence told me that the problem that is left is that while I have all those skills, the soft skill, for the employer is such a risk to hire me in a senior position, knowing that I didn't learn those skills in the environment of the company. Because sometimes that's a crucial component, because we talk all the same language where we are in academia, but there is a different mismatch when we go into industry. But the other part of the story that he didn't tell me yet, and he was about to introduce me, is that every time in this company there is someone that has done graduate degree, even if they enter as an entry level, their career progression is much faster and much smoother, and they can leverage all the soft skills that they have acquired in a thriving environment in industry. And that's how I can gap on the other side. I can feel a little bit this gap, because I can, even if I get offered an entry level, even I can start in an operational role, instead of being disappointed about that, I can take that as a stepping stone to get to my superhero job, and the one that I deserve, and every PhD student deserve. So to tell you a little bit of the result, just a few hours ago, I got a job offer for a job I really like, at a position that it will be operational at the start, there will be a lot of research, and I'm sure I can grow into a job that would fulfill my ambition later on. And because that's a work in progress. So I know I got the job offer, but now it's where the difficult path starts, because now I have really to reflect on myself and make sure that I can use this opportunity for the best, instead of being and for growth, instead of being sad if something goes wrong, and if I don't get a business if I don't get my business idea immediately on the plate on the first day. So let me finish by rephrasing the title of my presentation, because maybe it was a little bit misleading. Maybe I shouldn't be on a quest for the perfect job. Maybe I should be on a quest for the job that allows for growth and learning. And this way we can really use all the soft skills and make them grow into something that we can all benefit from. Thank you I hope there are some questions. And if you want to listen more about my stories, you have my Twitter handle, so you can see how this quest will develop.
Thank you very much, Valentina, for sharing your exciting journey, and congratulations once again for getting the job and sharing the story. And I really like the way you kind of reshaped your future goal, which is basically the learning and growth opportunities. So we are actually quest for lifelong learning, and this is something what MCAA is here for. Our members are helping each other to grow. So thanks once again, and I'm sure we will have a lot of questions from the audience. But right now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Karen Strubans. As I said before, she is a policy expert. She was the vice chair of MCAA Policy Working Group, and now she's one of the board member and contributing in the science policy. She would be sharing her journey, of course, and as well as what changes we need to make in the researcher career assessment to basically for future. So Karen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mustafa, for the nice introduction. So what I want to do today is give a bit of a really specific perspective on this story, thinking about the academic incentive structures and how we can change those to promote intersectoral mobility more, alongside also addressing a range of other issues. And so I'm going to start, my starting point here is really that researchers focus their attention on those activities that give them the best chances to progress in their careers. And I think actually Mostafa illustrated this quite nicely at the beginning, showing that 52% of people in academia expect at the beginning to actually stay in academia. So obviously what they will be focusing on is those activities that give them the best chances to progress within academia. And within academia, transferable skills are actually often bottom of the list when it comes to hiring and promotion. And to illustrate those points a bit, the first small piece of research I want to refer to is actually a piece of research by Noémie Aubert-Bon. And so she did surveys to look at research culture. And specifically in this case, she's asking researchers which for certain aspects of research, whether these are important, so essential, irrelevant, or unfavorable to different things, to advancing their career, to advancing science, and also to their personal satisfaction. And what she sees from this is that the things that satisfy us most are the things that actually help us most in advancing our careers. In terms of these transferable skills being important or not important, or more generally, what are the things that are valued in different sectors, what I actually wanted to do here is give a very short introduction of my own career, but also look at the sections in my CV throughout my career and how they changed. And so I also started out as an academic. I did my PhD at KU Leuven in Belgium, and then I moved for a postdoc to the University of Cambridge. During that postdoc, I started to realize I wanted to actually move in a different direction. And in 2017, I landed my first job in the Royal Society, which is the National Academy of Science in England. And Valentina, it will maybe be a pleasure to you to hear that that was an internship. And that in 2 years' time, well, actually a bit more than a year's time, I landed a policy advisor position at the Royal Society of Chemistry. And just a few months ago, I started to lead my own small team. So, it can indeed go quite fast. But to come back to, what is valued in each of these sectors in academia versus the science policy sector that I moved to, I had a quick look at, the CV I used to actually progress in each of these sectors. And things that were really prominent on my academic CV that have meanwhile disappeared from it are a bunch of lists of publications, lists of conference contributions, lists of awards, and lists of memberships of scientific communities. And things that have now appeared on my CV that seem to be much more valued outside academia that actually weren't there before are my key competencies. And as Valentina referred to, also evidence of those, a record of how I use them and how I can evidence those. And also my professional development, showing that I am eager to grow as a professional. And without these sections, honestly, in the same way that Valentina's husband wouldn't have hired her, these companies wouldn't have hired me here either. And it was something I really learned the hard way, because I think, in honesty, I wouldn't probably have needed the internship if I would have known how to present my transferable skills in a better way, the ones that I already had, but I just didn't know yet how to talk about them. So I think a conclusion for me from these is that creating greater intersectoral mobility between academia and other sectors will actually require, in part, to change the incentive and reward structure within academia, to put more emphasis on those transferable skills and teach us actually how to talk about those already during our career in academia. And I think there's agreement on this. This is one piece of evidence is a literature review by Euraccent, which is the industry counterpart of Euraccess. And they were looking here specifically at promoting intersectoral mobility and concluded, this is one of several conclusions, that there is a lack of mutual understanding between the worlds of higher education and business. And I think Esther already referred to this kind of communication gap. And I think this was in respect to expectations, but I think think also here in incentive structures and in the skills that matter, there's a gap and there's a language problem. And so one of the recommendations proposed here to improve the situation is to make changes to the academic community's incentive and reward structures. And this is actually also reflected in a piece of work that the Marie Curie Alumni Association published in 2019 together with Eurodoc on sustainable researcher careers. And this was thinking about careers going forward in academia as well as moving out of academia, and actually ideally being able to eventually also move back in, because I think that is also a really important issue at the moment. And so the third recommendation in this declaration is to put more emphasis, asking people, employers within academia, to put more emphasis not only on transferable skills training, but also their recognition, with even a suggestion to include transferable skills in researchers' performance evaluation. So it's really valued and seen as something that will count towards hiring, towards promotion. At this point, I want to kind of broaden the conversation up a bit and include another element, because I think that changing incentive structures does not only have the potential to improve intersectoral mobility, but to actually address a range of research culture issues holistically and, together. Where am I coming from with this? So just to give you a bit more on my career path. So when I joined the Royal Society for my first policy job, I was working on their research culture program. Research culture, I've mentioned the term a few times. Research culture was defined in that program as encompassing the behaviors, values, expectations, attitudes, and norms of research communities. And we were trying to really look at a range of issues holistically rather than at each of them in isolation, covering things like inclusion and diversity, intersectoral mobility, collaboration versus competition, ethics and integrity. And the big conclusion for me from working on this, and something I've since been really passionate about, is that actually many of these issues have a similar cause, which is the highly competitive environment in academia, combined with very narrow definitions of what success looks like. As a result of this and other movements, broadening the definitions of success in academia is actually really rising on the agenda, especially in Europe. There's lots of things going on at the moment. And also within the Royal Society program, we were thinking about this. And actually the project I was leading on within the program was to think about a new resume for researchers. And the aims were really to, on the one hand, include many more diverse contributions that researchers make. For example, contributions to their own development and the development of colleagues, contributions to society, for example, in the form of knowledge transfer, contributions to the research community in the form of peer review, in the form of sharing data openly, sharing software, and so on. And that had to go hand in hand with encouraging a diversification of career paths in academia, because we cannot expect everyone to excel at all these things. People need to be able to make choices, focus on certain things, and develop in those directions. And the idea would be that people already are more focused on, for example, industry collaboration or public engagement or policy engagement. And it makes it already easier to then go on in those kind of career pathways later on. So as I said, at the moment, there is a lot of momentum. There's a lot of initiatives going on. There's frameworks that are being developed. There's IDs. There's new kind of matrices to use. So for example, there's this open science career assessment matrix that has been developed. There are principles for assessing research, fostering research integrity in particular. And I think, there is a real opportunity at the moment. But I think we need to really think about, when we do these exercises, how can it address all these issues that are interlinked together? Because, for example, most of these examples that I'm showing here, they're not really thinking about how can we improve intersectoral mobility in this exercise. I think it's one of the things that is probably least integrated at the moment. So my final message that I want to share today is that in all these discussions that are being held and all the frameworks that are being developed, the opportunity to effectively address a range of interlinked issues, and including also the challenges around intersectoral mobility, which I think are huge, should really not be missed. So for everyone in the audience who is thinking about career assessment or recognition in any form in academia, I would really say grasp this opportunity and try to include all these issues that are really, I think there's the potential to address looking at incentive structures. And to people who are not working on incentive structures in academia, I would say reconsider maybe to have a look at them, because I think for me personally, this is really the holy grail to improving research culture and to improving research environments for the better. And I think I'll end there, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Karen, for sharing your journey and especially your recommendation about the intersectoral mobility and also the effort on career assessments. We will talk a bit more details during the panel discussion session about that. So it is my honor to introduce the next speaker, Francisco Lone, who actually needs no introduction. So I would leave up to her to talk about her career journey and her thoughts in the recent times. Francis, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mustafa, and thank you to all the amazing ladies that presented before me. I'm kind of the oddball here, the non-European, the what we're going to call now the crazy American, because everything here in the US is now absolutely upside down. And it's important to recognize that up front. But I'm really humbled by the invitation to be a part of this panel and this discussion. I think what I'm going to do is I'm not going to show slides because I think the perspective I bring, more than the technical details being useful to you since it's from a different system, the US system. I think what is most useful for this conversation is to talk about my journey from the bench to to as a policy advisor, and to what I'm present day involved in, and how I think that the different parts of my training and my career have come into play. And what things were useful, what things I had to adapt, completely discard, like some of you said, eliminating. There are no publications in my CV. That is not useful right now. And so, but to start at the beginning, I did research the traditional way. I got my PhD at a university here in the United States. I was a developmental neuroscience expert at the time. And I became interested in the ways that science could impact society. And that happened because I was watching at the time decisions being made at the White House at the time, as a long time ago, it was when George Bush was president of the United States, about stem cells. And I was working on cell lines myself, and looking at how those cell lines were maturing and developing and how that happened. And there were these decisions made that only certain cell lines could be used because some stem cells were too early, and that was clashing with religious perspective and views. And so policy decisions were made that were having a direct impact on scientific research and what could be done. And I was outraged about how these decisions were made, who was making them, and who was informing them. And that was kind of the beginning of my journey into trying to figure out how science could better inform decision-making for science, but in general for society. I decided after my PhD to join the US government, and I did that through a fellowship here in the US called the AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowship for the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And I became an advisor at the State Department, which is our foreign ministry, for a little over a decade. And Mustafa knows I'm very open and honest about this period in my life because I made the decision, even though I was a career bureaucrat all that time, working on policy issues as a generalist, and really hoping to advance evidence-based decision-making and our relationships with countries, many of your countries around the world during that time. When the Trump administration won the election and became the administration for the United States, I made the decision that for my personal set of values, for my desire to continue to advance evidence-based decision-making in the process, that there was a mismatch between my value system and the value system of the incoming administration. And I'm open about that because I think there's a feeling in general that scientists can't have a value system, that scientists can't be involved in politics, that scientists have to remain in this amorphous, neutral bubble that is unrealistic to life and the way life actually works. All right. I'm a Hispanic woman. I'm part of a minority group in my country, a group that was being attacked daily by the rhetoric of the incoming administration. That was part of my value system. I am a scientist, but I am also a Hispanic woman in science, trying so hard to advance these communities' progress in the scientific fields in the United States. And so I felt that that was a mismatch. That was something that I was unprepared to handle and deal with from graduate school. Those things weren't talked about. Those things weren't, my ability to communicate about these things and be able to do that effectively, I developed along the way later. Much like Karen talked about, these weren't things that were incentivized. It wasn't part of the incentive structure here. It never has been. And are things that I have worked on and called out and worked to improve for the different scientific communities. So what was useful? My problem solving skills, my analysis, my tenacity, the grueling work hours of a scientist in grad school were certainly useful. What wasn't useful as a policy maker or policy influencer within government were my inability to speak in concise, brief terms, my inability to work across many sectors and divisions and ways of thinking and issue prioritizing, because in science we are very siloed and very specific and very right. And so I had to develop a completely different set of skills to be effective in decision making and influencing decision making, and adapt my vocabulary to be able to frame issues in the terms that other thinkers were handling them. Science wasn't just about science for science sake. It was science to improve the economic conditions of societies. It was about cooperation between countries for solving a common challenge like climate change. So I had to really learn about my vocabulary, adapting, much like Valentina had to do for industry. I had to adapt my vocabulary to talk about economics and political cycles and prioritizing, not necessarily the way we are trained. So, I think that in many ways, academia thinks that it knows how to solve a problem. It already knows what the issue is. And I can tell you, in many cases, it does not know what the problem that policymakers are trying to solve is. Policymakers, on the other hand, think they have enough science already. And they got it. They have advisors in their national academies of science, and it's all taken care of. And if they need it, when they need it, they can call somebody up. That is also not the case. They do not have enough. They do not have it integrated into the process, and decisions are made without that influence all the time. I also need Mustafa to give me a time check as I'm speaking. So I'm watching you. Okay, so I think that the decision I made to leave government, the national government, made sense for me in terms of the policy skills and all of those soft skills, transferable skills that I had integrated into my resume or my way of doing work. And I decided that I needed to go local, that to be effective, I needed to have an influence on how local policy decision making was happening, and that there was a place where I had spent part of my time growing up that was confronted with many of these issues. There's a place where I live now, the place you see behind me in South Florida in the United States. It's a majority minority population. And it is a place which is ground zero for climate change here in the United States. And my quest was to take everything I had learned from my time doing policy at the national level to apply it at the local level to help decision making that would directly impact people's lives. And one of the things I figured out is that at the national level, policymakers think they know exactly what people need in the municipalities, and that they've got it, they don't. And they don't know what is happening. So it's a sort of a thinking of national versus municipal that I have applied my scientific skills to, leveraging local academics, local organizations, and local governments to really make a difference on issues that are a global nature, but that impact people's everyday lives. I, in general, take a more active view of how science is to be used. I do not believe in the theory that scientists should just generate results and put a paper out and then hope that somebody will read it, internalize it, translate it, and apply it. That is actually never how it happens. Many times that research those results go into this void, this abyss, and that connection to the actual people that need the information to make tangible, concrete decisions that impact people's lives, that is not happening. I think scientists need to be in that space of helping decision makers. I'm very much, people ask me, well, science isn't supposed to be political. Let me tell you something. Take this from the American in this room right now. You may not think you need to be political. And in saying that, I do not mean partisan. I do not mean picking a side. I do not mean aligning with a political party. But if you do not figure out that there is a side of decision-making and the use of science in decision-making that is political, politics will be done to you and to your research and to your policies and to the things that affect people every day. And the best example I can give you is the handling of the COVID pandemic here in the United States. We thought we had all the systems in place. We thought that it could never be corrupted, and that science would always be the first go-to and the first priority in decision-making for society. And in the US, we saw those systems fail. And it was because of politics. And scientists found themselves at a loss when they were silenced, when their recommendations were not listened to, and when they were marginalized and sidelined. And so it is a warning tale in ways of the way I see that scientists need to be involved in policy. And that first chart, I think that Esther shared with the desire to be involved in government was probably at 9%. I think government and decision-making is an amazing place for scientists to be. You do need a complementary set of soft and transferable skills, but we're very much ready and able to do this, and it is a place where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances, once again for sharing your wonderful journey and your thoughts on how scientists could play a role in the policymaking. We would come back to you with more questions, and right now the panel discussion will start, so you can also ask questions. Whoever you are listening, you can also ask questions to all our speakers. There is a chat function at the streamline, so please use that and you can ask questions anytime. In the meantime, I would like to share that we are asking you, so we also have questions for you basically. So what do you think are the most important issues for you? What are the major barriers for you to advance your prospective career? So please go to the menti.com and use this code and give us your answers so that we can discuss. So once again, I would like to thank all the speakers for their contributions. And right now, the discussion session is open. So my first question would be to Esther, to you. I mean, here you have an interesting career journey, because just after PhD, or if I understood correctly, even before finishing your PhD, you started your career in nonprofit sector. So how did this journey happen, and what are your expectations before and after when you got the job? And I think you could share, if you could kindly share some of your thoughts, that would be quite interesting for us.
Yeah, sure. First, thank you all very much for the previous talks. I really enjoyed listening to them. And there are many things that actually were in your talks that also apply for me. So I think unlike Valentina, I knew relatively early that I don't want to stay in this kind of system for a long time. So it was about culture. So for me, it was a lot about feeling alone, not having a team. And it was also about, for me, like doing something meaningful a bit. So it was a bit too narrow. So actually, this is honestly, when I got most frustrated, I decided to join the Marie Curie Alumni Association and to get active there, to expand a bit, to learn a bit more of those skills. And they actually really helped me to get also my position right now. So whenever you get this feeling, just take the chances you get to broaden your transferable skills in that way. And so this is why I was looking at different positions. And honestly, I was first into like doing research in industry, and the nonprofit I am in now. Well, I have to admit now I really love my job because it's in between the two worlds. So we're trying to bring research into application, and we don't have the constraints of industry that we have to make profit. So we're having very innovative research projects. We're looking into it. And I'm now trying to do like economic and ecologic analysis. So to see basically how to move research into sustainable application in the field of biotechnology. So for me, that's personally very exciting. And what I like most is the freedom I have in the work I do and the way I progress. So there's lifelong learning. I totally agree, Valentina. It is super important. I think it's the most important that you have the ability to grow. And when I thought about going to industry, this is something where I was actually afraid of, that there would be somebody telling you what to do. And I would not like that. So this is how I ended up at this job. So it's a nonprofit. We have to write proposals to get funding to do an analysis on those projects. But I really enjoy it, and I also like the broader picture. So in my research, you're so specialized and you really lose the bigger picture, and also people around you lose this bigger picture. And this is something I really enjoy right now, because I'm seeing the whole process. Like in my case, how can you turn waste, CO2, maybe also hydrogen in the future, to new products, to new building blocks, to chemicals, to whatever, to get into a circular bioeconomy. So those questions, they're of course not, they're not directly linked to policy. So we are lucky, we have a big pro movement for us, because now there's also the year of bioeconomy and there's the Green Deal. So there's a bit of positive funding going in there. But I can imagine that other fields are not that successful at those days. And I really like Francis' talk to motivate people to think about their research and to actually see, I think you cannot be non-political. Well, that's also my opinion. So yeah, I think that covers a bit what I'm doing now, and let's see where it will take me. If you have any questions, please.
Thank you, Esther. In the meantime, we are receiving questions from the audience. So there is one question: do you have advice for trying to communicate the skills you have to employers without them deciding that you are overqualified and therefore they shouldn't hire you? Maybe one of you, Valentina, if you could kindly focus on this.
Yes. So there is a very little known fact that the job market that you see is only 20 to 30% of the actual job market. So when they tell you you're overqualified for a job, it's probably because you're not applying for the job that you should be applying. And it's very difficult, it's very challenging, especially in industry. And that's what I can talk about, because that's where I've been searching. And if you look for the dark side of the job market, for those jobs are the one that the employer rarely advertise, because they are so they are the job for which a PhD graduate can have the skill to fill in. And the way you get those jobs, unfortunately and fortunately at the same time, is through networking. So you get the opportunity to participate to this event, to talk with people, make a good impression, and then try to apply for those. If they tell you that you're overqualified for a job that you really want and you feel like it will be a good fit for you, then try to understand what it is in your CV when you talk with the recruiter or with the employers offering the job, what it is in your CV that they think they cannot match your salary, and try to open a discussion, a negotiation. But to me, the key takeaway is to network and make good impression with people and look for the jobs that aren't necessarily advertised, for which you will have a better chance of not being overqualified.
Thank you, Valentina. If you look at the questions we asked to the audience, and there you could see the communication skills are really like top of the ladder, basically, because there are a lack of, I think there are a lot of training right now, but then again, how you effectively communicate is still a challenge for researchers, and especially for the different stakeholder. Right now, we have expert in the speakers and in this panel, basically how to communicate with the policy, but then again, how to communicate properly with your prospective employer. This is actually a challenge. And I would like to ask Esther, what do you think about what are the takeaway from the survey? Because especially this survey was done on 4 domains, if I remember correctly. One is material science, one is chemistry, biology, and biotechnology. And interestingly, 4 of our speakers are actually from all these different fields. So what is your takeaway for this, basically? Do you think that there is an effective way to communicate with the employer, with the survey, basically?
Yes, basically, I think the first thing would be doing the survey, because it will really help you, because normally you don't think in those categories. As Valentina said, you really know about what kind of measurement method you know, or you can apply to do your experiments. But all those roles that are identified there, you don't know about them. And often also people don't know about actually, or they don't think about what they really want. Is it really team, or do you want to lead? Do you want to, I don't know. So have different, so it really helps people to quantify a bit what they want, and also the employers. And this actually helps to address this gap. So communication is definitely a point, but first you need to know what to communicate. So it's a little bit also what Karen said. I think we lack a bit of a training at university where you actually see what are your talents, and also training to obtain more talents. Mm-hmm. And often they're more, especially if you do a PhD, I totally agree, you learn many soft skills. Mm-hmm. And this kind of looking at it is new to many PhDs and postdoc, and it will help them to actually go and write their CV, talk to others. And personally, I think what helps a lot to talk to people like Valentina or others who did have had this experience, and to share, basically, to get others to learn how to communicate. And I think often it will come at some point. There are a few of them that will stay in research forever, but for many, you see it in your CVs. It's like, for me, not even until the PhD, but then maybe in the postdoc stage, you will start realizing that maybe there's something else out there, and you will think about how can you qualify or show that you're qualified to work there.
Thank you, Esther. Karen, you shared different surveys and different results on the career assessment. We also, from the association, we know that there are a lot of surveys about the research issues affecting researchers' life. Do you time to time think that we have actually too many surveys and less implementation, and there is less coordinated effort about all these issues, be it the survey, be it the implementation? What is your thought on that?
Can I first add something to Esther's answer?
Yeah, sure, definitely. Go ahead, please. It's a live discussion. Jump in, whoever wants, whenever you want.
I think on the issue of communication, I would say I think there's things that can change already in academia. One of the flagships of Europe is responsible research and innovation, where the whole idea is to include industry partners, the public, a whole range of stakeholders from the beginning. I think if we would implement that, we would already learn a lot about communicating with all those stakeholders, and it would actually prepare us already for a lot of other jobs. And then on communicating with employers specifically, I mean, I had my best conversations with people already in the industry I wanted to move in. Those were the really helpful conversations in terms of how to represent myself and how to, bring to the surface skills that I had, but that I hadn't really learned to talk about in that way. So those are just a few additions to the question on communication. Then coming on, do we have too many surveys? I do think the exercise on research culture is done over and over again. There was already the bioethics report from Nuffield, I don't know how many years ago, but that already had the conclusion that, the narrow definitions of success are really one of the key problems in academia. And I think programs after that, we've had research culture program of the Royal Society I worked on. Wellcome Trust then did a big survey. There was one, I think, from Cactus in India now. So, everyone's doing the same investigation, and I think that the result's always the same. And you're right, Mustafa, we need to move on. We know what the problems are. We need to start to think about the solutions. And I think the most important ones are those solutions that can really bridge many of these interlinked issues. And so for me, research assessment is really the holy grail if it comes to that. So let's move on with that.
Thank you, Karan. I will come back to another questions with the career assessment or research assessment, but right now I have a question for Francis. I mean, you have shared your story, your journey from AAAS fellowship to your State Department, and now you are working at the policy level, basically at the local level, to change the policy and kind of bottom-up approach. Looking at the current global situation, you see that basically researchers' voice are not heard. And as you said in one of the personal discussion with me, that researchers' voice is actually have the least importance in the decision-making process. So in your opinion, what role researchers should play basically to proactively engage with evidence-based decision-making? So what can we change? Because we know that the policymakers are not listening. So what can we do additionally, so that they can listen?
So, yeah, I mean, that's the question, right? What can we do to change the system? I think that the efforts to more fully integrate the science academia branch with the decision makers through organizations like yours, through the different let's just call them organizations, institutions that have that bridging role. I think that's very important. The support for here in the United States, for example, I think the lifeline and what we have begun to figure out is that we had pathways to bring scientists into government through, for example, organizations like the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And that took us further, one step, than what was the traditional way of doing science policy advising, or where scientists would get listened to, which was the traditional way is you have a national academies and they get calls when the government has a question. I don't even have to tell you why that is probably ineffective. But what the AAAS program did, and it started in the early 70s, was kind of shatter that notion that that was the only way to get science policy advice, and that if we really wanted decision-making to be influenced concretely by researchers and their knowledge and results, that we had to be fully integrated into the system. And these many years later, we have scientists that have made that full transition and now occupy positions of leadership, or at least up until this administration, occupied positions of leadership and in many of our government agencies. And that pipeline continues. That has been one of the ways in which we have been able to influence the process more directly and ensure that we're being listened to, because we're not only yelling into the building from the outside, but we are now sitting at that table where the decisions are being made. And I think that is crucial. I can apply that to even at the local level. When committees and boards are being formed to make decisions or influence decisions for people, it is imperative that scientists be a part of those decision-making bodies. I think to expect that somebody's going to call you and ask you to get involved or to come help is unrealistic, and it is leaving the issues on the table for somebody else to take them over. A lot of people ask me, oh, you have all of those crazy anti-vaxxers in the United States, or the climate people, the climate deniers. Why is that? And my response to that is usually they are fringe, but they are loud. and they grab the mic and they speak very loudly into that mic, and they bring celebrities, that don't know any better into their cause. And then the scientists are sitting there with their hands folded across their desk or bench, watching this happen with no mic, no platform. I think we have to stop this passive scientist mentality. Why are we letting non-fact, non-evidence, non-data take over the issues that are so important to society's well-being? When we have the results, we have the data, we have amazing spokespeople, but somehow this idea that it is not pure enough to go talk to mainstream audiences, that it is not elite enough, not dignified enough, has sunk into the scientist's brain, that the only people that is dignified to talk to is other scientists at scientific conferences or people that are in our field. And so, of course, the non-fact, the non-science grabs a mic, speaks to the press, has the blog that gets the most hits. So I think my take on this is very much that the scientific community needs to move from passive voice to active voice, that you have to ask for that place at the decision-making table in your municipal board that is making decisions about STEM education for your district, province, community, that you have to get involved in the committee that is making the decisions about how to prevent sea level rise from destroying your coastal city. That you have to say, wow, there's really no good people running for office for the mayoral seat in my town, and I am smart, accomplished, look at my superhero resume like Valentina's, and maybe I can run, or maybe I can support another scientist in my community to run for that position. And so I think that we have to break down the barriers that we have mentally, that have been sort of placed in us from our training, that we are supposed to only exist in this pure bubble of the ivory tower, and only talk to people inside that bubble, because outside of that bubble, life is happening, and people's lives are being impacted by not being able, by decision makers not listening to our voice. And most of the time, it is because we haven't imposed our voice into those conversations, because we think that that's not our place.
Thank you very much, Francis, for sharing your thoughts. I mean, first Esther and then Karen.
I just have one question for you, or maybe an example. So, for example, it's the same for me. I'm just expert in my own field, and I think it's the same for many scientists, that they actually say, okay, but I'm a fact-based scientist, and I don't know the exact facts about, for example, some political decisions about maybe the coronavirus, because maybe I'm not a virologist. So how would I dare speaking about a discipline I'm really not an expert in? I would always tell people, did you prove this information? Are you sure about this? And I would never dare to just state something, the sea level is not rising. But it's just like, how can scientists bridge this? Because actually they would need to talk about something they're actually not an expert in, and maybe they had no time to read a real Nature article about this topics. So maybe they look the normal news as everybody else, and this is how my opinion comes up. I think it's the same maybe for everyone. I don't have all the time to read through all the journals for all those issues. So what would you suggest to me or to all the other scientists who are expert in a very small subtext of a field and don't dare to talk about those big issues?
Is that a question for me?
Yes,
okay.
Francis.
And I think Karen can probably jump in here too. I mean, what you come to figure out is that at the level of the decision making that is happening, whether it's municipal, province, state, national, a lot of those decisions that are being made, you don't need to have published a thesis on it to become informed enough and to be able to ensure that the process has the right data at its base, right? So my job wasn't always to be the expert on the atmospheric science, but I could very well tell you very briefly why a fossil fuel economy was wrong for us and how we needed to transfer out of a fossil fuel economy into a renewable energies economy to reduce emissions. And I didn't have to have a PhD in that. I can very well, as a scientist, as an analytical thinker, grasp the essentials enough to be able to provide the information that is needed in a very quick turnaround, because these things happen sometimes in a very quick timeline, and be able, I have the knowledge and the networks to connect the right experts for the detailed technical expertise that is needed as you're formulating the detailed policy, right? So as a member of committees at the National Academies of Science, I am able to bridge worlds that they wouldn't be able to bridge on their own. I know where to look, I know where the right people are, so I can tell you that. Who's gonna tell you exactly what the carbon tax policy should read exactly to what detail and all the numbers? That won't be me, but I know where that person is, and that is why I'm an essential piece of that puzzle. So I wouldn't shy away ever from being present and deliberate and active in a decision-making process, because you as a generalist are the best voice and connector for the process.
Thank you, Francis. If you, Karen, if you could reflect on that, and then Valentina.
I mean, yeah, to add to that, who else will be in the room? Maybe you will be the most expert person. We can't really take the risk that every scientist says, I'm not expert enough. And then, we end up with no scientists in the room. In my current role, in my previous role, actually, I was working on open access policy, inclusion and diversity, and waste and resources policy. And now I am starting to lead a team working on chemistry, how chemistry contributes to environmental and health policy. And in the first few weeks of the new role, when they were sending things for me to comment on from media and things like that, the first thing I often said was, I'm not an expert in this. And the first thing my comms team said was, you have to really drop that sentence. It has to just, you have to lose it from your vocabulary. So, you interact with scientists, and you become a voice, and you become almost a translator between science and policy. And to just add a few points on that previous questions on how do we bridge that gap between science and policy, how can we get scientists more involved? Again, one of my answers is, if we would recognize more policy contributions from scientists and evaluate them against those as something that's as valuable as a publication, I think we would already get a lot more contributions. And then I want to just also support what Francis said. I think scientists do need to be more vocal. We needed a 16-year-old girl to tell us to put climate change on the agenda. That's really poor form, I think, on the scientific community. So, I would just reiterate that I think it's really important for scientists to recognize, especially in this time and age, that we do need to have a voice, or it will indeed get lost and no one will say it for us.
Valentina, if you could reflect on that.
Yes, and actually, I wanted to reply to Francis and add a few things, but Karen gave me the perfect segue, because we did need a 16 years old. And the reason we needed a 16 years old is because the scientists that have been vocal, they were talking the ivory tower language. They weren't talking a narrative, they weren't talking a story, and they weren't talking to the people that could listen and really assimilate the message. So to me, there is a good opportunity there from what Francis said about being more involved in your local community, but that involvement starts at the kitchen table during Thanksgiving. Don't shy away, and don't talk the ivory tower language. I've been extremely involved in communication in the past few years. One of the things we've done with the Marie Curie Alumni Association is making comedy show about science, because you have to go explain the science in a way that is relatable. You have to share a message, and you can do that even if you don't want to run for mayor in your city hall. You can still talk with your peers in a way that is engaging, that can share the message, and that can be relatable, because that's the gap that has been formed It's also a communication gap. It's the same gap that there is from industry to academia. It's the same gap that there is from policy and science. It's the same gap that there is from society and scientists. We don't communicate, we don't talk the same language, and then a 16 years old will be much more affected because we haven't filled the gap in the term of communication. And please, if you have to take away one thing from communication today, do not ever say there is evidence that these things blah 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 blah, because when you talk with someone, we know that if there are hundreds of publications about vaccination not causing whatever is the in thing, that the autism or whatever it is that they are claiming back to you, do not say we don't have evidence of that. Say vaccination do not cause autism or whatever is. Climate change is real. Not there is evidence of climate change is real. Don't put yourself in a position of disadvantage, and tell the story instead from the point of view of a narrative that you can share and you can make relatable. So those are my really big things that I think that everyone can do that. You're a scientist, you want to stay in academia, you don't want to move to policy, you just want to do the bare minimum of supporting other scientists working in policy. There is other things you can do, because you can talk with your peers, because you can talk with your family. You have a Facebook account that is not just scientists. Just share it there and communicate in a way that is not relatable.
Thank you very much, Valentina. We have less than 10 minutes left. There are one other questions coming from audience. But before that, I would just like to reflect. So all comes back to a couple of topics we discussed basically today. Frances, you talked about the value chain, basically how researchers are not said or trained on the value about their values, and this is something like what Esther, you said that okay, this is your value basically, that you are not an expert, you don't want to talk about it, but we need to have a nice combination between the values we are trained, and we need to be a bit more brave, and we need to know how to communicate. And most importantly, right now as an organization, we are also working both on science communication as well as the policy sectors. We see that there are gaps as well as there are room for improvement. And I think the next question is kind of reflects on that. One question from audience was, how can we at all bring all individuals and organizations working with evidence-based decision and policymaking to form a shared knowledge platform, such as a World Policy Forum, so working locally and sharing globally as well? Can we create such a platform? I would like all the speakers to reflect on that, but before that, I would just want to give my comment on that. In my opinion, it would be extremely difficult to find such forum, but it exists, not for all topics, but for some topics. There are World Science Forum, there are open science initiatives, so like fragmented way. Just to give you that, and I think one of the speakers today mentioned that the coordinated effort, basically bridging the gap between organizations, between individuals. We have seen this example, at least from the Open Science Initiative. So when there was this issue with the Open Science Initiative, and one of the largest funding organizations from Europe actually moved back, and before that actually, all the young scientist organizations, Global Young Academy, Young Academy of Europe, EuroRock, and MCAA are working together for Plan S, for Coalition S. And I would say that we are making progress in the right direction. So this is just one example how bringing or having a coordinated effort can actually help. So with this question, I would like to very shortly ask all of your reflection. And because we are having really less time, I would also ask my last question to all of you, which is, based on your own experience, what advice you would have given to your younger self? Choose a time for yourself, maybe 5 years back, 10 years back, to reduce the skill gap for your own future. So I would like to ask Esther to start, and then Valentina, Corinne, and Frances.
That's a tough one to start. So you said 10 years back?
Maybe 5 years, choose the time, it's up to you.
Well, what I would say, dare to be curious and open, and don't let suppress yourself from any kind of culture or system, even though your PIs will tell you you don't have time for this course, do it. Yeah, just believe in yourself and progress yourself and learn the things you want to do.
Thank you. Valentina?
to me, I'll take everything that Karen has said in the policy landscape or redefining success. For me, it will be, I'll talk to little Valentina and tell her, define success for yourself. Don't let anyone tell you that you have to get that professorship. They don't tell you that they don't listen to people that tell you that there is one path. And moreover, don't tell yourself that, and just explore and define your own success.
Shall I go next, Mustafa?
Yes, Karen, and if you could also reflect that coordinated effort on making our policy forum and that question, that would be great.
I mean, I think, in principle, it's not a bad idea, but I think we need to first get it right at the national level, and we're still struggling with getting science policy actually into national systems. So I would say, let's first get that right, and then we can think about, doing that at a worldwide level. On the kind of advice to myself, I agree with both Esther and Valentina's comments. I would say, for me, there was really a realization in my own career where I ended up in this lab in Cambridge where literally everyone, and this was a big group, 100 people, everyone wanted to become a professor. And I kind of felt like, oh my God, and people were really, you could feel people were getting obsessed with it. And I felt like I need a plan B, I can't just let this define me. And I started to really do other activities in the policy landscape to prepare for my plan B. So I would say, don't put all your eggs in one basket, have a plan B, and, define your own success, as Valentina said.
Thank you. Frances, if you could kindly reflect.
I think on the global policy forum or platform, I think that I'm not a big proponent of creating new organizations and institutions when we have ones that we still need to strengthen and perfect so much. So I'm with Karen on this. I think we have the Global Young Academy is very active on policy matters. That's a great way to get involved. And the World Science Forum is a great forum every 2 years for those elements to all get together. So I think I would play in the sandboxes we have. In terms of what I would tell myself, that contrary to what we think, science very closely mirrors the same ailments of society within it. And it is not isolated from those. The Me Too movement, the gender disparities, the racial justice, everything that we see playing out here in the United States on the streets and in the different institutions and societal fora have happened, are happening, and occur in science as well. I don't think that science is in any way isolated or protected from those things. And having an awareness of that as we move forward our values work within science, I think is very important.
Thank you very much for sharing your input. And just before, we have little less than 1 minute left. So just before we go, I would like to ask all the attendees, you can basically follow if you have any further question, you can follow this hashtag. Our speakers will be happy to answer or give your feedback, as well as I said at the beginning, Marie Curie Alumni Association is continuously working on all the issues we talked about, be it career development, be it science policy, or offering customized training for you. So please check our website as well as follow us on Twitter. And just that you know, we have a very special book, a crowdfunded project where we would like to basically encourage the young scientists, young researchers, or future generation researchers on science or STEM education. So this Marie Curie, The Power of Persistence, a Super Science Hero book, this is available on Amazon. You can check and buy that. With this, I would like to thank all the speakers for their time. I think we could talk at least 2 more hours at this time, and unfortunately, we don't have enough time. So thank you very much for your participation, and I'm looking forward to talk with you once again, hopefully in November in the virtual conference organized by Marie Curie Alumni Association. Thank you and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.